As you know, today we are celebrating the day that Master met Swamiji, which was September 12th. And just to explain a little bit about the next few days, we might have done a program like this, or done another program on the day of September 12th, the actual anniversary day. We would also have done a satsang like we are in fact doing right now, but we realized when looking at the schedule, when the Answer movie got extended by another week, that it means it will be playing on September 12th. And we thought, what better way for us to celebrate the day of Master meeting Swamiji than to go to the movie and to see Master meeting Swamiji, Swamiji meeting Master, I should say. And so it's so wonderful that we all have that image in our minds, as Dharmini was saying, and have that scene. You know, if a picture is worth 1,000 words and a movie is, more than 1,000 pictures, it's a lot of words. And it conveys something very meaningful. And so we are hoping to all just go to the theater. If you can book your tickets in advance, please do. And it would be wonderful for it to be a sacred occasion for us all there. So when we realized that, we thought, well, we should have this satsang first, and luckily you all responded to the call, and here we are. We'd like to begin with a video of Swamiji speaking on discipleship, on the subject of discipleship, and on the occasion of the anniversary of his discipleship, which was, in this particular case, it was his 50th year, 50 years of discipleship. In total, Swamiji had nearly 65 years of discipleship. It's just amazing to contemplate in itself. But this is just a short video of some of his thoughts on that.
What is my definition of discipleship? It isn't sitting around talking about the Guru so much, and yet I have to say that in all these 50 years I've spent a great deal of my time meditating on Master, on what he did, on what he said, trying to understand what he said and did more deeply. It's been sort of the focal point of my entire life. But at the same time, discipleship means, I think, something more. And in this, Master encouraged me, because, I remember back in 1950, Master told me, your work is writing and lecturing. And I said, but sir, hasn't everything been written that needs to be written? And he looked a little shocked. He said, don't say that. He said, much more is needed. And in fact, this is the role of a disciple, not to be a parrot, not to be a record player, just repeating the words of the Guru without understanding what those words are, but trying to go deep into them, trying to understand them more deeply, and then also trying to enlarge on that understanding, trying to show how what he did is relevant. And this is, to me, the amazing thing. In a way, I really am just a parrot. Not an unthinking parrot, I hope, but somebody who I'm not trying to create. I haven't created anything new. Everything I've done has been a spin-off, so to speak, from what Master gave us. And the more deeply I've gone into his work, the more I've just been amazed at how extensive his mission is. Its potential far more than any other teacher, and although I have not meditated on their teachings to the extent that I have on his, obviously, nonetheless, I've had to refer what he said to what they said to see if I've understood well. Living in a vacuum, thinking in a vacuum, you don't get as clear a picture as if you see that, have I understood it? Is it something, because he'd never contradict what other great masters have said. And therefore, if they all agree, you can be more confident that you've understood than if it looks as if one is saying one thing and the other is saying something quite different. So I've been aware of what other people have taught, but I have not encountered ever, anywhere, even in history, any teacher or teaching that is so broad in its scope, in its potential for changing an entire era. Most of them talk about the individual, about going into your own self. This, of course, is what the path is really all about. But he gave me another mission. I haven't been able, and in fact, I remember Brother Bhaktananda used to be quite envious of my creativity. The funny thing is that I was envious of his lack of creativity. I was envious of his being able to be a humble devotee who just thought of God and loved God and didn't think in terms of broad vistas of meaning, which I was cursed with by my own nature in a way. I could not be otherwise. When some of the people in SRF used to speak of this as being ego, I don't know. All I can say is I had no choice. My interest lay that way, my absorption lay that way. I could only go, and it would have taken a great deal more effort on the part of this ego to suppress that than to flow with it. But the thing that has come out of it has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with my abilities or my talents. Rather, even in those, quote, so-called abilities and talents, I found that by tuning into him, suddenly I was able to do things that I could never do. Often in music, for example, because I haven't had training as a composer. Yes, I studied piano for years. I don't know how good I was. I don't think I was particularly good, but I wasn't particularly bad. So let's say sort of super mediocre. And when I was writing music, afterwards I would think, how on earth did I do that? I don't understand. I don't know where those chords came from. I don't know chords. I don't know what the names of the chords I write are. I don't know anything about chord progression. But when I tune in to him, and when I say, well, it's got to be so, therefore it is, suddenly I do know. And it's not at all that I'm just beating around in the dark. I know exactly what I'm doing. And the greatest musical expert in the world could challenge me, and I'd stand up for what I've done, because I know it's right. After it's over, I don't know how the heck I ever knew. And the same is true, I think, for just about everything. I give a talk, and I have no idea what I said afterwards, because I just sort of give it back to God. But it's not my talent, you see. It's something that I have put myself in tune with Master, and not only ask his spirit to do it, but also been absolutely fascinated by the extraordinary scope of that spirit, by the extraordinary scope of his glimpse, his understanding of the needs of this particular age. Now, what he taught today wouldn't have been true 200 years ago, wouldn't have been true in the time of Shankaracharya. It was right for now. And it was absolutely right. That's why I say he is the avatar for Dwapara Yuga, at least for this beginning part of Dwapara Yuga. And we all enter into that.
So just continuing on in this theme that Swamiji was speaking, it is very natural to think of discipleship, to think of Swamiji's meeting of Master in terms of its significance personally for us. This is not wrong. In fact, it's crucial. If it weren't for its significance personally to us, we wouldn't even be sitting in the room today. And I think we needn't have the operating system during the talk. So if you do, you could do that, but you might as well just turn the thing off. We'll need it back in a moment, but not just yet. So, of course, it's natural to think of it in terms of its personal significance, and again, it's right to do so. It's sort of like, well, for one thing, we find it isn't that Master says, love me. He says, don't look to me, look to God through me. It certainly isn't as if Swamiji says, love me. He said, it's all Master. Even in this talk that we just saw, he said, it's all Master. And yet, we find that we can't help but love them. And that's again why this day is so special to us, because it's the day they met. And from that spark was lit this flame, this blaze that has burned so brightly that it's drawn us to it as well. Just the sheer fact of each of us being in this room comes from that day, September 12th, 1948. That was, you could say, the first domino that fell and led all the way to 2013, 14, 18, and so on, to bring us here. And so it's natural that we honor this day for its significance, not historically, that it was such a big deal then, but that let this be ever new for us, that we are constantly meeting Master each day. I had a friend recently who was going through a difficult time with his family, and I said almost automatically as I was saying goodbye, I had given him different pieces of advice, none of which were all that great. And so in one last act of desperation, I said, "Oh, and pray to Master about it." And then he wrote to me later and said, "Thank you so much for saying that, because I hadn't been praying to Master about it. I had just been he didn't say this, but I can imagine, just caught up in the problem." And he said, as soon as I prayed to Master in my meditation, I felt a great calmness and a great peace enter, and the meditation was a lot better. It wasn't that he wasn't praying to Master generally, of course he was, but about this particular problem. Sometimes when we're caught up in something, we can think it's mine to deal with. No, this is my problem, I have to face it alone. No such thing. If you wanted that, you're on the wrong path, because Master is always with you. As he said to one of his disciples, "Am I not always with you?" And as you saw reflected in the movie again and again, that Master knew Swamiji's thoughts. "I know every thought you think," he said. And it wasn't true just for Swamiji, it was true for so many of the disciples, meaning they had these experiences too, to share, to prove it. But in addition to this, we can also understand that there is a much broader interpretation, a broader implication of discipleship, of our discipleship, and so on. There was one thought I wanted to finish. Why do we love Master and Swamiji? Because of how our lives have changed. Because of how we have been helped through this path. At least speaking for myself, but I'm seeing enough nods that I don't mind assuming that it's true for many of us. If we have been helped, why wouldn't we naturally offer gratitude to the source of that help? And that gratitude grows to love because of that, because we see how we are not alone, and how things we may have wanted to do or felt to do or didn't know how to do, suddenly these things in our lives we're able to do because they're doing it through us, or they're literally instructing us, or we're practicing the techniques that they gave us, and so on. Master Sri Yukteswar told Master the way to have people love you, not that he was encouraging get people to love you, but he said the only reason people will love you is if you are useful to them. And we can say, who has been more useful to us than our Guru, and also our Guru through Swamiji, because it is really through him that we've come to know Master. And this movie itself was a script written by Swamiji, and that's how we've even gotten to see the movie itself. So, at the same time, from the personal, as Swamiji was saying in this video, we want to be able to expand that to understand the divine aspect, the aspect of grace also that Master has brought. Because Master was not just our Guru, and not just the Guru to a few, but he was an avatar also. And so he has come with a divine mission for this world that we are a part of. As I've sometimes said, it's like as if your dad were the CEO of a big company. and even though everyone else might call him, Sri Tata or whatever it is, you would just call him Appa and not be bothered with all that fanciness. And so yet it would be a part of our legacy. So it's the same way that our spiritual father and fathers have a great divine mission in this world that we are a part of, but not with any sense of self-importance and not with any sense of obligation for firing the mission and jamming it down people's throats. Obviously not. It's just an offering, a joyful offering, but yet it should be an offering. As Master expressed to Swamiji, and as you saw in the movie, that none of the disciples at that time were showing the interest in spreading this work to others. It was as if Swamiji, he said, was the one who saw the need. They were more interested in their own growth. And this is understandable in a way. Even in the early years of Ananda, there were few who saw, perhaps, I'm from what they have told us in their talks, that personal drive to spread the work. Because Swamiji was there. He was spreading the work. I mean, what could we do to spread the work? Nothing. But he was there doing it. But over time, he encouraged in people that spirit, especially if they had it, of taking what they had and trying to reach others in some way, and even seeing that as the duty of a disciple. And so I wanted to share with you some thoughts he gave on this subject. This was written in an essay, but it was written in the form of a letter that was then given out to everybody, not just the people of Ananda, but anybody. It was a brochure called A New Dispensation, and that means basically a new gift or a new offering. This is how Master referred to his work all the time, that this work is a new dispensation. Swamiji writes, I have a discovery to share with you, something exciting, in fact wonderful. It's a discovery I've come upon not in a sudden flash, but gradually with a growing sense of awe over a period of many years. I touched on this discovery in my book, The Path, now entitled The New Path. In a chapter titled God Protects His Devotees, I stated, in the almost 30 years, which was true at the time of that writing, as I have been on this path of self-realization, I cannot recall to mind a single instance where a disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda has failed to find protection in time of real need. Considering the length of time involved and the thousands of disciples I have known during this period, this is quite an amazing record. Swamiji continues, my reference in that chapter, backed with example after example, was to protection in the face of danger. Well, over the 6 years since I wrote that book, I've realized that my claim, startling though many a reader must have found it, barely scratched the surface. Much more than protection is involved. Divine power, increasing inner security and joy, freedom from mental and emotional delusions, an ability to ride the storms of destiny instead of being driven by them helplessly, a sense of belonging at last, meaningfully so, in the universal scheme of things. In what has often been described as an age of alienation and loneliness, how wonderful to find a way out that is at the same time a way in, into deeper attunement with life, with love, with one's fellow man, with God. A special dispensation is a subheading here. I first noticed this extraordinary blessing while living as a monk at Mount Washington and serving as a minister at the SRF Church on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. Those who took up this path earnestly came in time to manifest a kind of inner radiance that I'd never beheld in anyone else. What I saw was a kindness in their eyes, an inward joy. Everyone they met found it inspiring. Were these changes, I wondered, simply the fruit of meditation, of sharing with others on the path, of reawakened faith in God? At first, I could only ask the questions. So again, just to explain, and in relevance to our own lives, As we meditate, we become kinder, we become calmer, we manifest more light, and so on. In fact, this is how we often explain meditation to people who are coming to the class for the first time, that it will make you calmer, it will make you kinder, it will calm the heart, more light will come through, and so on. And it can be, the question Swamiji is asking is essentially, is that the only cause for these changes? In other words, if you meditate, then you'll be calmer, and really it's meditation that we have to thank for all this. Years later, in 1967, after founding Ananda World Brotherhood Village, I began to observe once again the same phenomenon. Visitors who took up this path earnestly changed in ways that seemed out of all proportion to the time they spent in meditation. Sometimes in hardly a week, traces of tension and worry would begin to vanish, inner joy to appear. Of Ananda members, I remember a visitor once remarking, "Normally, to meet even one such person would be enough to make one's whole day. But here, everywhere I look, I see people with this power to make my day." For many years I've traveled the world, Swamiji continues, and almost everywhere I've met followers of this path. Always the story has been the same. Paramhansa Yogananda often said, this is a special dispensation. More and more over the years, I've come to realize what a wealth of divine promise he had packed into that simple statement. And so he's telling us now that more than meditation is needed, and in fact the growth that he observed in people was out of proportion, as he said, to the time they spent in meditation. And we see it here too, that people, after just a week of trying to practice Hong Sa, they start to become calm right away. And of course, even more gratifying is what we've seen in our own lives, and what we've all seen in each other, and how that light really starts to shine forth. Over the years too, I've made a few specific observations. For one, that those who serve this work selflessly are those also who gain the most from it. That those again who try to share with others the light they receive gain more spiritually than those who keep it to themselves. As Paramhansa Yogananda said, the instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. That they gain the most who seek attunement with others more advanced than they themselves are on the path. And that they gain the most finally who realize that soul attunement with this path is more important even than long hours spent in meditation without the companion effort to establish such inner attunement. I remember in this context a certain woman disciple of this path, a resident of the SRF community in Encinitas. The chief impression she made on me was the joy and peace that she radiated. One day she approached our guru with the news, "I'm leaving this path. I found another guru." "Very well," the master replied respectfully, "I withdraw my ray." A year later she returned for a visit. To our sorrow, the joy and peace in her eyes were no longer there. She looked like any other worldly person, asleep to higher realities. And just to be clear, because sometimes people in hearing this story will say, why did Master curse her by withdrawing his ray? I hope it's clear he withdrew his ray only in response to her request for him to do so. It wasn't that he said, "You want someone else? Fine. Take that." It's that she said, "I want to leave." And he said, "By all means then, go ahead. And I free you, basically, to, as her guru at that moment, I free you to become the disciple of someone else, because you've asked that." You see, he respected her free will. And that is why he did that. Her example helped me to realize the truth of what our guru often implied in his talks with us, that through our connection with him, we were affiliated with an actual ray of divine power, a power far transcending even such great blessings as true teachings, scientific meditation techniques, and the saintly example of a great master of yoga. This is the point I'm trying to make. And so if there's only one point you're tuning into, let it be this. It can seem that the greatest blessings of this path, of Master's path, and as expressed through Ananda and through Swamiji, is true teachings, that the teaching is true. That's very important. Scientific meditation techniques, and of course including Kriya Yoga itself, and even the saintly example of a great master of yoga, as we had in Master and as we had in Swamiji. That example which held us to the highest, because he showed us that it was possible to come from that highest place, and so we could strive to do that too. But these are not the greatest power. As he said, there is a divine power, an actual ray of divine power animating this work and blessing us all. This is the grace of God, and it's not something that is tangible. It's not something that you can call level 5, grace of God. It doesn't come that way. It comes, though, and that hidden influence. And that's part of what Swamiji was explaining in this as a discovery. The discovery of a hidden influence is the major factor in what changes each of us personally. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? At least in theory? Okay. Paramhansa Yogananda would tell his students, you are not connected with a mere organization. In one of his talks he said, not that with an organization that's trying to teach something that it doesn't know anything about. He said, it's not that, but with the great divine power, flowing through a line of self-realized masters. Again, he would repeat, this work is a special dispensation sent from God. Inner proof of the truth of his assertion came to me easily. The more I attuned myself to the divine grace flowing through him, the more everything in my own life flowed smoothly. The opposite proved true also. Whenever I sought to progress spiritually by personal efforts alone, without this attunement, I found myself gradually bogging down. Gradually, too, the objective evidence, as in the case of that woman disciple, mounted. And now I've been a disciple for over 40 years. I can say it with conviction. A special ray of divine grace definitely flows into the lives of those who embrace this path of self-realization sincerely. Many, as I say, are the rays of divine light that God has sent into the world. Each has its own special qualities. Those devotees who tune into a particular ray will reflect its qualities in their own lives. As Paramhansa Yogananda put it, all of Krishna's soldiers were like Krishna. All of the members of the family of self-realization reflect in their lives those qualities which are particular to this special ray of divine grace: kindness, as I mentioned before, and joy, openness, trust, and a certain inner radiance. In this world, and at this particular time in history, God has sent a powerful ray of His light. To see this ray only in terms of Paramhansa Yogananda's personal life and teachings would be to misunderstand the true greatness of his mission. The secret of Yogananda's greatness lay in the clarity of his transmission of a new ray of light from the divine. As many as receive it, and in proportion as they receive it, to them, as he told his students, will be given the power to become the sons of God. You see, we have to, when you ask for more, God gives more. When you draw more, more comes through. And when you draw less, then less comes. As Swamiji said, as Anandamoyi Ma said to Swamiji, she said to the disciples of hers, I am just like a drum. As you beat me, so I sound. And of course you say, no thanks, no one wants to hit Ma. But it's that if you tap, a tap comes back. If you pound the drum, a big noise comes back, a big noise of blessing. Master did this too in a rather subtle way. He was shaking hands with people after service, which was one way of blessing people. And then one person came up to him and went, and put their hand out just like this. And Master put his hand out like that too. And just... You see? He wasn't offended. He wasn't going, well, if that's how you feel. It was that he was responding in kind. And so again, all we have to do to draw this is to be interested. If you say, well, some people are blessed that they seek to draw more. Some people are blessed with more hunger, more devotion than I have. No. Or the easiest way to develop or deepen that is simply to be interested. And if you can't be interested, then be curious. Well, I wonder what this is all about. Maybe I'll pick up one of these 149 books and start reading it. And maybe I'll, again, investigate on my own. And in this way, you will fire deeper interest. You all have interest. I'm not saying this as a correction, but I'm saying in order to go deeper. Finally, what Swamiji says is this, at least this goes on, but this is the last part I'll read. Truth, to be sure, as I said earlier, cannot be personalized. It exists even if no individuals appear to declare it. Nevertheless, in the spread of a religious teaching, transmitting stations are necessary. Without people to radiate the light they receive in themselves, the light itself dies out in the world. God works through living instruments. This is a teaching that has been insisted on in India. The individual devotee grows spiritually according to how well he attunes himself to the special divine ray to which he has been drawn. And an important aspect of this attunement is service to the ray. I am thinking particularly of two disciples of this path. One, a devotee who for years meditated long hours every day, but who never sensed the need for attunement with the ray represented by his guru, who was Master. And the other example, a devotee who for as many years never meditated well, but who served this ray lovingly. I would never downplay the importance of meditation. It is, however, an interesting fact that of the two, the second devotee was by far the more shining. I'm thinking of another example as well, someone who left Ananda village, giving up the opportunity he had had for years there to serve the ray actively, in order to live near one of the communities founded by Master, and to become absorbed, albeit passively, in those holy vibrations. A year later I saw him again. To my deep regret, he seemed to have lost much of his former spiritual power. And Swamiji explained it was because that man had been actively serving. He had had opportunities to serve when he was in Ananda and expressed the teachings through his own life. And near the temple that he was living now, though it was Master's temple and had Master's presence before, and obviously the blessings will be there forever, but he had no way anymore to serve. So even being in a holy place, it's not the same thing as, he moved to, I don't want to name a city and then have someone say, I'm from that city. No, so let's say it's not as if he moved to Detroit or something and stayed away from all temples and then he lost the light. He moved to one of Master's temples. So, what greater blessing could there be in terms of, your address and your neighborhood? And yet, the fact was, without an ability to serve in any way, and without that being drawn from him, just passively being in that, he had lost something. So, to conclude, the instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. As Yogananda said also, to be in tune with the Guru, you must serve his work. The best way of serving the Guru's work is to be oneself a transmitting station for the ray of light that his work represents. This one can be whether or not one ever teaches, or for that matter, even speaks. It is a matter of consciousness, of radiating outward not only to other people, but to the flowers and trees, to one's work, to the very atmosphere, the blessings one has received. For yourself too, if you want to be more in tune with the ray that is shining through this work of self-realization, seek out those who are already in tune with it. I have seen over the years that those who sought their attunement with Yogananda, but who didn't also recognize the need for personal contact with living instruments of his ray, have not received nearly as much. I remember Master, even when he was alive, telling new disciples to mix with the older ones. Devotees generally who think to advance on their own, or only in direct inner relationship to Master, don't know what they have in the opportunity to be with others more advanced on the path than they themselves are, those who are living instruments of this ray.